All right, so I just hit record. So we're here with Dan Strauss, the Raspberry Ape, for the Grappling and Physio podcast. Dan, thanks for coming on, and it's a real pleasure to have you here today.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here, mate. Thank you for having me.
And it was really great to meet you face to face for the first time at Mauricio Gomez's Legacy Cup at Warwick Uni a few weeks back. And I got to say, good grip.
I feel like half the people that I meet are putting a lot more, a lot more attention into a handshake. Some people want me to squeeze a hand. I mean, I don't do it on purpose, but.
No, it is one of those things that if you're going to shake the Raspberry Ape's hand, you better know that he's coming with a very strong PSI grip strength ability.
Well, you know what? I've got some really old school wrestling books, and there's a really good one with George Hackenschmidt, who's this legendary strongman and wrestler. And the first technique that he teaches in the book is the handshake. So, you know, it's all part of the game.
Interesting. Well, we'll get into that later. Sure. So, I mean, for those that don't know, so Dan, you know, you're a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt under Roger Gracie, or depending on where you're from, Roger Gracie.
Yep.
You're the author of, you're the owner and you run the Raspberry Ape Podcast.
That's correct.
Do you also run a BJJ competition as well?
I do indeed. I run a tournament called Kleos Grappling.
Brilliant. And you also participate in the Polaris BJJ team as well, don't you? The European or the UK team?
Yeah. So I compete. You know, I've been lucky to be a part of Polaris on sort of many different, pretty much every way that you can be part of Polaris. So I've competed on there both as an individual on the UK team, and if I'm not competing on there, then I do commentary for them.
Fantastic. Would you class yourself as an active competitor at the moment, or have you stepped away from all that?
No, I class myself as an active competitor. I just haven't competed. You know, COVID was rough for competition, and then I competed on Polaris in August last year, and was kind of looking forward to that being first one back, and then I could, you know, continue competing. Unfortunately, got injured in that, and have been basically kind of still recovering, but looking to start competing again about a month or so.
If we go back to the beginning, how did you find BJJ, or how did BJJ find you?
Yeah, so I basically was looking around for loads of different martial arts for years and dotting in and out of stuff. I wanted to do some martial arts, but I didn't really know too much about it, and I tried this and that and all of these different ones, and none of them really stuck for some were a few months, some were a few weeks. And then I found jiu-jitsu, but it was Japanese jiu-jitsu at the time, at Mill Hill Jiu-Jitsu Club. And basically my instructor, who unfortunately passed away end of last year, Nick Brooks, he was part of the Mill Hill Jiu-Jitsu Club, but he had already discovered Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he was training in the corner while we were doing our blocks and throws. He was rolling around with one of his guys, a guy called Chris Hearn, and basically they were doing their own thing, having discovered the true martial art of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and they weren't interested in doing the old traditional crap stuff. And then one day the main instructor left and Nick took over, and then that was basically it. So I never ever joined a jiu-jitsu club, and that is the team that I'm still part of to this day. I never ever have joined a jiu-jitsu club, a Brazilian jiu-jitsu club. I joined a Japanese jiu-jitsu club about 16 years ago, and here I am, still part of that same club.
That's brilliant. Don't do that. How did you become kind of affiliated with Roger then? Obviously, if your lineage is Roger Gracie, how did that come about?
Yeah, because Nick was under Roger.
Right.
So Nick was the Roger Gracie black belt, and we were at one time affiliated with Roger for many years actually, and yeah, that's basically it. So I got my black belt in 2015, I want to say, from Roger. 2014 maybe.
That's the year I started.
I'm getting old.
How's the journey been?
Yeah, I can't complain, mate. I can't complain. It's been pretty good. I mean, I don't know what I'd be doing if it wasn't for jiu-jitsu. So yeah, I definitely can't complain. You know, I love it. It's you know, it's everything that I do, and everything that I love doing. So yeah, the journey's been pretty good, and I've been very fortunate to be able to meet and train and speak to and be involved with some amazing amazing projects and some amazing tournaments, and I've competed against some amazing heroes of mine. Yeah, I've been very lucky, and I continue to be lucky every day.
What do you think you'd be doing now if it wasn't for BJJ?
I have no idea. That terrifies me to even think about. I don't know. It's one of those things where in a parallel universe, I never walked into that dojo, or and I have no idea what I would be doing. I'd have to click restart on the whole game and go again to see what happened organically. But I wouldn't have a clue. It's such a, even if I stopped doing jiu-jitsu today and anything related to jiu-jitsu, the influence that jiu-jitsu's had over my life in the last 16 years has formed who I am as a person. So even if I was to do something completely different today, it would still be because of jiu-jitsu. So if jiu-jitsu was never in my life, who knows what I'd be doing.
It's interesting, isn't it? They say it's quite, the saying, well, jiu-jitsu can change your life, and it's quite cliche, but I'm a big believer in that. I believe, since that very first patient that walked into my clinic years ago, who I said, "What's the matter with you? Why have you got so many injuries?" And they said, "I did this thing called jiu-jitsu. Well, it's Brazilian jiu-jitsu," and that triggered my journey to get into it. And again, it's been absolutely, it's been incredible in such a short space of time. And I just can't, very hard to imagine. Yeah, it's hard to imagine the last few years without it, to be honest. And I think that's why COVID was such a struggle, wasn't it, for everybody in the jits community? It really was.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and I certainly have a a bad habit of doing this, but I think some of us within the jiu-jitsu community can over mystify jiu-jitsu. I think that if you do anything with passion, it will change your life. But then at the same time, I do believe that jiu-jitsu is unique in its or not unique, but is exceptional in its immersiveness. And when you do it, most people, not everyone, but most people who do it will be drawn very in it for a huge percentage of the population who train jiu-jitsu. It is not just a hobby, it is a lifestyle, and you kind of see after training for even a short amount of time, you start to see the world through the lens of jiu-jitsu instead of seeing it through the lens of whatever the hell you saw it through before jiu-jitsu. So yeah, I think it can have that effect on many people. But doing anything with great passion, that's what comes down to it. It's doing something that you love, and the positive effect that can have regardless of what it is, jiu-jitsu or not.
What is it that you think that's innate in all of us that draws us to, well, especially the male population? I know, like, there's a big population of females that participate in jiu-jitsu, but what is it, do you think, about the male population that draws us towards it, and especially as opposed to jiu-jitsu as in comparison to judo or to karate or to anything? Are there any other kind of, and I've got my own interpretation of this, like in regards to other sports, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I think it is. I think it's a massive, I do believe that what we do in jiu-jitsu and grappling, I think you can include judo in that, and you can include wrestling in that, and other forms of you can include other pugilistic arts, striking arts, Muay Thai, kickboxing, boxing, stuff like that. But it is different. They're kind of two sides of the same coin, but they are very different sides. They're almost opposing, yin and yang. The grappling and the striking. I think grappling has this very primordial, evolved preference for the male, for males to fight, to be able to fight in a way that isn't damaging. I think that's the biggest difference between striking arts and between grappling arts, is you have the ability to control, defeat, kill if you want to, but also being able to practice that with essentially a massive amount of safety. You cannot get punched in the head safely. It is impossible by the very definition of what you're doing. And this is something why I'm a big fan of the striking arts. I love watching MMA, and I have a huge appreciation for the sweet science, so to speak. But and there was, I got into jiu-jitsu originally because I wanted to, very early on when I was in my teens, I really wanted to be in the UFC. I wanted to be an MMA fighter. And I just fell in love with jiu-jitsu too much, and I didn't want to have to take any time away from jiu-jitsu to train the other things. And now at the age I am, and also, where I am, my thoughts on that, I have zero intention of ever being punched in the head. You cannot be punched in the head in a safe manner, even if you're getting tapped in the head, gently like this. It's going to be damaging for your brain, and that is everything. It's something that you need to protect. So grappling's this really unique form of combat where you're able to go really hard, but with an incredible amount of control, and to not hurt someone. And I think that you look at other animals in the animal kingdom, and you see that they will play fight with each other. And I think that is something that it's very likely that we did. Wrestling is, they call it the oldest sport in the world, and it definitely is, because it translates directly into things that would be useful in a practical sense in the wild, so to speak, fighting with each other, fighting with other tribes, fighting with animals, even if they attack you. The ability, to be strong and to be fit and explosive and flexible and be able to move and have endurance. All of these things are really important in a practical setting in a more savage world, so to speak, in the past. But also the play aspect of it. And, when we go to a jiu-jitsu academy, even if you go really hard, we're just playing with each other. And it's something that's actually lost, especially as adults, in a lot of the modern world, is that play, and that rough play, and that aggression that you're able to get out in a controlled manner. So I think there's many reasons why it appeals so deeply to so many, especially to males. But not to leave any of the women out, jiu-jitsu is really picking up for women in a massive way recently, and it's awesome to see. So I'm a big fan of the kind of emergence and increasing popularity of women's jiu-jitsu. But also we have to look at it for different ways. A woman doing jiu-jitsu is awesome in a very different way than a man is. It appeals in a different way. For women, it's about empowerment, and about being able to defend themselves in a, on paper, not necessarily a more dangerous world, but it feels more dangerous because we hear about it a lot more in social media and stuff like that. So, giving women confidence and empowering them, and seeing that they're able to do something physical, and, they can be strong, and all of that stuff is great. For men, it's a different thing. Obviously for some men, the confidence is a big thing. It is a big thing, to have, but also for a lot of men, that isn't an issue. And the issue is more about having a way to express themselves creatively and physically, and get aggression out, and kind of get that rough play that, kind of, I feel like instinctively males really want.
It's interesting what you say about play there. If you put two kids together on the grass or on the field, or if I put my two boys together, the first thing they do is clinch up, and that one will try and throw the other, etc. They don't start throwing punches. Or when like when you see little cousins or brothers together, they don't throw punches until the emotional trigger gets fired, and that's where one loses the temper, and then they start hitting. But before that, it's usually play, like rough house. That's actively encouraged in my house with all my kids, with in the lounge, where we all start on the carpet, just trying to get past daddy, or get on my back, or and have a little bit of a rough and tumble. And I can definitely see why that transfers over well to jiu-jitsu.
Absolutely. Sorry. Yeah, go on.
Sorry, go on. No, you go.
No, I was just going to say, you're absolutely right. I was was with my nephew, my 5-year-old nephew, yesterday, and what he wanted to do is wrestle the whole time. I mean, I loved it. I was wrestling with him all day. But it is, you see kids, they play, and you're right, they don't strike unless, because I think kids don't want to hurt each other for the most part. Nice kids anyway, don't want to hurt each other, but they still want to be able to get that rough and tumble. So I think that there's something, and I think play, that's a whole other topic. It's a massive topic, but we're missing play in general is something that's really missed by adults in the modern world. It's not encouraged, it's seen as childish, but it's something that's actually really important for us.
Anyway. Do you ever see jiu-jitsu progress? I asked Kev Webb this question. Do you ever see jiu-jitsu progressing into schools, or becoming part of a national curriculum with development, physical development?
Yeah, I do. I think I think that it will happen. The speed and popularity that it's rising is amazing to see. There's some countries in the world that already have it part of their national curriculum, like in the UAE. It all comes down to having people in high positions who see the benefit of the sport. And we have that, and we have that more and more. One of the interesting things about jiu-jitsu, and I think because, I say this every single time that I talk about jiu-jitsu, really, we have the UFC and we have MMA to thank for the popularity in jiu-jitsu, because we piggyback on the success of mixed martial arts and the real mass market appeal of the UFC and MMA. But people want to train that, but they don't necessarily want to get punched in the head, going back to what I was saying earlier. So, the number of celebrities that you see training jiu-jitsu nowadays, it's really the fad thing to do. And it's the trendy thing to do. If you are there was a time where you could reel off all of the names of all of the high profile celebrities, A-list Hollywood celebrities who train jiu-jitsu. Now you wouldn't even be able to, because there's literally too many. You could almost reel off a list of high profile celebrities that train in one area of London. It is crazy. And it's really amazing to see. And I think hopefully it's not a short fad. Hopefully this is something that continues to rise in popularity. And I think at some point it will permeate into you need to have someone. The reason why jiu-jitsu is in the schools in the UAE is because the sheikhs are massively into jiu-jitsu. So when you have someone really high up who sees the benefit of jiu-jitsu, especially for kids, I think then we can expect to see it in our school curriculum. But I think that will happen. I am optimistic that will happen maybe in the next 5, 10, 15 years. I'm not looking at this as a short-term thing. This is a long-term thing for sure. You start by getting it in a few schools. It's very difficult to break into that though, but to get it and also understand that jiu-jitsu is, there are a lot of hurdles and boundaries for combat sports in schools. That's a lot of well-trained jiu-jitsu instructors that you'll need to be able to do that in all different schools. But maybe it is a fantasy, and there is a level of risk when teaching a lot of jiu-jitsu, but maybe the stipulation there is that you don't teach them any submissions at all. The kids learn, and maybe we're even looking at it in the wrong way, as actually looking at it as teaching jiu-jitsu. That doesn't necessarily need to be what we want to do. What you want to do is you want to have kids moving, you want to have them wrestling, you want to have them, kind of doing all of the stuff. A lot of the benefits of jiu-jitsu doesn't necessarily need to be jiu-jitsu, and that could set up kids for when they're out of school and they want to join a club, or whether they want to progress into their teens and start doing something that more resembles what we call Brazilian jiu-jitsu now. But I think many of the aspects of jiu-jitsu could be implemented, and we'd see in my personal very biased opinion, we would see potentially huge changes in the culture and society, and youth crime, and the epidemic of knife crime that we have, especially in London, stuff like that. I think jiu-jitsu is a really good way of getting young boys especially's aggression out, and channeling the energy that they have, and the camaraderie that you build is so important as well. So I'm super biased. I think everyone should do jiu-jitsu.
That's really good. Yeah, I know thought about it like that. So not so much the emphasis of the jiu-jitsu curriculum, but all the benefits like movement, building confidence, and getting them in that classroom environment. Yeah. Do you think it'll ever become an Olympic sport?
Again, there's a lot of hurdles in the way of that.
Do you think it needs to be? Like, no. If you listen to
I'm too old now, I don't care anymore. I wanted to be in the Olympics, so at this point I don't care.
But there's also the danger that, let's say, if it did become an Olympic sport like judo, that it becomes too much sport, and then they lose a lot of, due to the rule set or the change in the rule set, they lose a lot of what they could essentially do. If you look at judo, when like Neil Adams was competing and he won silver back in the 80s, as opposed to that looks like pretty much like jiu-jitsu back then, because they could do so much double leg takedowns, etc. And the Nawaza, the grind game, was so kind of competitive. And you look at it now, it's very much about the ippon and very much standing. It's probably a load of judokas screaming at the moment, going, "What are you on about?" But
no, you're absolutely right. There is judo was invented for the Olympics, and most sports that are put in the Olympics these days either have to be relatively simple, or they have to have been almost designed with the Olympic guidelines in mind, or be very, very old sports that, that already are very established and they're worldwide and all of that stuff. Jiu-Jitsu is basically none of these things. There's no international governing body. The international governing body, the IBJJF, the closest thing we have to that is a very much for-profit organization who are not going to want to relinquish control over to the Olympic Commission. And there's a very heavy bias of Brazilians. So, Brazil get a lot of medals of jiu-jitsu in the Olympics, and even in the rule set. So there's lots of issues there. We're trying to get jiu-jitsu into the Olympics. Should it be in the Olympics? I mean, I don't know. It's something that I kind of flop back and forth on. If it never gets in the Olympics, I don't care. I don't think that that's necessarily the be all and end all of sport. There's so many sports in the Olympics now that it doesn't really matter that much. I think jiu-jitsu can be can grow to massive heights without having to worry about being in there. The fear of relinquishing control over the rule set of jiu-jitsu to the IOC is a big issue as well, just like you said with judo. Judo is a great example of that. I don't know. I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. Maybe it will be in the future, 15, 20 years, if jiu-jitsu continues to have the meteoric rise it's had over the last 10 years, 15 years, then it's a possibility, but I don't really care if it is or not. I almost don't want it to be.
That's probably a shared opinion, I would say, by the higher seniority of most of BJJ. They've probably passed that point now, or surpassed the threshold where they think, well, we don't necessarily need it. So what's the point?
Well, yeah, it's a big discussion. I mean, we could talk for hours about this. The increase in popularity that you have by being an Olympic sport, thereby there being, but the place. So obviously with Olympic sports, one of the big things you talk about is getting funding. The UK Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Association has just last year been recognised as the official national governing body of Jiu-Jitsu in the UK. So in the UK, we can actually get funding from the UK BJJ. Academies can get funding, and events can get funding from the government for jiu-jitsu, which is a massive, massive change. I feel like almost people aren't really talking about this enough. But yeah, so we're kind of already, we're recognized by Sport England now, which is something that actually almost more important than going to the Olympics for an individual country is to be recognized by its government officiated sports program, which is Sports England.
Well, let's go down it. Well, I remember that going live, I remember that coming out and basically that being, I remember when that happened. What when you say apply for funding, what does that mean? So anybody or club, people at the moment who are listening go, hang on a second, what does that mean?
I'll be completely transparent with you, and I'm not actually sure how much I'm allowed to talk about this, and this will make sense in a second.
You heard it here first.
Okay, don't get silence for this. So I am now on the board of directors of the I'm an independent director for the UK Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Association. I did that because somewhat middle of last year they were looking at having an election and looking for members, and I applied and got a position as an independent director on the board. And we had a meeting recently, and I was the position that I'm in basically is to try and increase the memberships there. I feel that the UK Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Association is a bit misunderstood and maybe has a bit of a bad reputation, maybe a bad bit of PR. And I think that people tend to be a bit skeptical about bureaucracy within our sport. But so that's kind of why I applied. I had no dog in the fight other than I saw that the UK BJJ were doing really good things, or they seem to be doing really good things for the sport. They managed to get a governing body and got recognition by Sport England. And I thought these people are doing something that I believe in, trying to push the sport. I consider it my personal mission to try and increase the popularity of jiu-jitsu and push jiu-jitsu in the right direction. Worldwide, of course, but more realistically, where I have most influence, which is within the UK. So I thought, well, I'm going to try and get on board with this and be able to help out and kind of see what's going on here and see how I can do the help. So anyway, I got this position on the board, and we had a board meeting last week. And one of the things that I actually brought up to them was like, guys, no one seems to understand what you guys actually do. And like, you can apply for funding, and I don't even know. I said to him, like, I am on the board of directors, and I do not know I do not know how I would be able to apply for funding if I had an academy. So it's something that we're going to work on, and that's what I'm going to be doing on the board is helping with their marketing and their publicity and stuff like that, and kind of having a bit of better communication with the community. But I honestly, I still do not know, because we haven't had that discussion yet. But I know that there are gyms who have been given grants by Sport England. You know, I think £7,000 for mats. We're just given. Wow. It's not a loan, but actually, you know, given by the government to help their academy to be able to grow jiu-jitsu. And to my knowledge, and I assume that they have to be member clubs of the UK BJJ, but I know that clubs can apply for funding for various things, be it mats, be it renovations, be it this, be it that. So it's a start. But yeah, I need to work with the UK BJJ, and we need to get this information out, because the more clubs that we have involved, basically, the more members of the UK BJJ we have, and the more member clubs that we have involved, the bigger the sport looks to Sport England, and the bigger the sport looks to Sport England, the more money that they can have at their disposal to give us for funding, basically.
Wow, very interesting. Well, definitely going to go on the website and have a look at that afterwards, and then I'll have a chat with my my coach Steve. We're at our gym, Turbo MMA and BJJ in Coventry, is on the kind of threshold of developing kids classes, but to do that, Steve needs more instructors because he's only so much he can do himself. We've obviously got to make sure everybody's CRB'd or has passed some sort of screening test, etc. They've got to make sure that they've done some sort of first aid training, you know, all these boxes that you need to teach before you put somebody in the formal position of an instructor, and especially to kids, so that parents can feel reassured that if they are dropping their kids off, they're dropping their kids off to a safe place where they have a process for, well, what if my son falls over or my daughter falls over and hurts themselves? What happens here? Who's the instructor? You know, are they a reputable person within the community? And to be able to do all that, there needs to be a lot of work that goes on in the background, and that if there's grants available that will help out with the cost of things like that, then that's absolutely fantastic. Brilliant.
Yeah. So look, I don't know whether your gym's going to be able to get money, but there's only one. You know, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. It never hurts to ask. And I know that the facilities are out there for some gyms to get that. So yeah, check it out.
I'm gonna start the email with, "Hi, Dan said."
Yeah, do that. No, seriously, do that. Make me look like I'm a useful board member.
Before we get on to your home gym and the plethora of equipment that you have got developed and all of that, I mean, as a physio, when I watch your videos, I go, God, that's brilliant. And it's great for me to see something. Oh, I've got one of them. I've got one of them. Oh, that's good. He's using this, and that's fantastic. Now, for anybody that doesn't know, you've got a great catalog of Instagram videos of where you're doing all these, you know, well, I would say different, a variation of exercises, not weird and wonderful. There's nothing that you're kind of essentially, you know, that's not possibly been done before, but it's how you do it and some of the stuff that you are developing. Now, before we get into that, you do, and again, because I'm a physio, I'm quite interested in this, and especially its relevance to jiu-jitsu. You have got a history of a bad back, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So what, like, are you all right for us to talk about?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
What happened there then?
So I basically I injured my back in 2012. So about 10 years ago now.
So you would have been about what, 24?
I was 21.
21.
Yeah. And I injured my back, and basically, long story short, went to a doctor. He said, you've got a bulging disc. Don't worry about it. We'll go back in a couple of months' time. I said, well, I've already had it for 6 months. And, you know, it really affected my training a lot. And then I saw a different doctor who did a CAT scan, said you have a broken spine, which was you have a fracture in your vertebrae, which is a pars fracture.
Pars fracture, yeah.
And then I was like, oh no. And he said, we could do surgery to stabilize it, but there's a 1 in 10 chance that it won't work. And then we'll have to fuse your spine. And I said, absolutely no fucking chance of that happening. And then I saw another, and time's going by throughout this, and I'm going through kind of bouts of not being able to do much and bouts of being able to do a little bit and still competing and actually doing pretty good. And then I saw another doctor who did another scan and basically came to the conclusion that yes, I have a pars fracture. It's probably, so basically I have 2 herniated discs above and below it. The pars fracture probably isn't super biologically active, but the discs are what caused me the problems. Yeah, go on.
Can I ask, sorry, just because there's a few interesting points there. Firstly, when you say doctor, you do mean like a spinal consultant?
First one was GP. Rubbish. Second one was a spinal consultant, back specialist. And then the other one was a surgeon, a specialist.
Okay.
There's a very good clinic in London that I unfortunately visit a little bit.
You're a regular at. Now,
not too regular anymore, but yeah, occasionally.
Now, what levels are the disc herniations at?
L5S1.
Okay.
If that sounds right. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. Very good.
No. Because I used to talk about it a lot more because it's kind of been really good recently. But L5S1 is where they're at. But yeah, the journey of recovery has been really long, but pretty good. I managed to, through much trial and error, I sort of found out what works, what doesn't work, and managed to rehab it to a state that I never thought I'd be able to get it to.
See, it happened at such a young age, which is quite, that's the tragic aspect of the things, that it was within your 21s. And whenever we see things that happen at that particular age, it's very hard to get a good resolution unless you have unless you had the right early intervention and you get your diagnosis correct from the beginning. So you see the right people from the beginning, essentially, and you start the process of investigation. Once you get your diagnosis, you can then map your treatment plan to recovery a lot quicker. And it sounds, from what you're telling me, it sounds, unfortunately, before you even went to the GP or the first spinal specialist, you were already managing these symptoms for 6 months.
Yeah, exactly. When I definitely didn't have the correct diagnosis early, and I didn't have any no treatment that I was given by. I did have a procedure on my back at one point, which was a dorsal root ganglion blocker, but wore off very, very quickly and essentially had no effect. So basically, no treatment. I saw many physios and therapists and stuff like that. Basically nothing helped. And the only stuff that really helped was what I kind of worked out by myself, to be honest with you. So I'd probably say after, to give you some examples, it was really bad on and off and obviously the first year was really bad. And then I started to kind of find out basically what stuff I can do, which is, let's say in the gym, I could squat, couldn't deadlift, couldn't do bent over rows. I mean, I could squat, I could do pull-ups, I could bench press. I was squatting like 200 kilos, but if you had thrown 10-pound coins on the floor and asked me to pick them up individually, I would have been crippled. It was a really weird where I could do something really well, but then hinging in the hip hinge was just terrible for me. So I just avoided it and just did other stuff. And because I was rolling throughout, I was able to, for the most part, to be able to continue the roll. I'd have a flare up occasionally, and that would put me out for a few weeks until it calmed back down. Couldn't stand up for very long, probably about 5-10 minutes. Couldn't walk for very long. About 5-10 minutes was about the limit that I could walk for. Bought a dog, started walking more, and just by sort of by continuing to do that, my body adapted to that, and then I was able to walk. And the biggest change really that came into my back was, funnily enough, was me doing stuff that I thought I would never be able to do, or I thought would make it worse.
Well, just before you go into that,
yeah,
is this because of your experiences with the physios in the past? Well, did anybody ever tell you, as a physio, when you saw a physio for a face-to-face assessment, did they ever say, right, avoid lifting, avoid this, avoid that? And
I mean, yeah. I mean, one of the first back specialists that I saw basically said your competitive career is over, and I went, well, I mean, every cliche athlete story starts with someone telling them that they have to retire or some shit like that. So I pretty much just ignored that. You know, physios don't like you lifting very heavy weights, or a
Unless
lot
they
of them,
lift themselves.
unless they lift themselves. But this is kind of what I you know, one of the things that I sort of discovered. There are a few exceptions, you know, but for the most part, or certainly for a long period of time, especially when I was dealing with my back, I would refuse to see a therapist, a physio, sometimes even a doctor, osteo, stuff like that, unless they did jiu-jitsu or lifted weights. I wouldn't see it because they just wouldn't understand. It was like me trying to talk a different language to someone. So yeah, it's massively important that someone understands that if I go to a physio and they say that you cannot tell me to stop lifting weights, because I remember I saw a really I was referred to by one of my specialists at this really great clinic in London to this really highly acclaimed physio in town who worked with Olympic athletes, who worked with the football teams. And, you know, the first thing he said to me was, oh, you don't need to be able to squat more than 140 kilos. Every word he said for the next 59 minutes was a complete, I just went straight over my head. Going, well, we're already not on the same page here, because I come in here and at the time, and you know what, looking back on it, I don't actually think he was wrong. This is the funny thing. I don't think he was super right, but I understand somewhat of what he's saying, because my philosophy on lifting and strength has changed so much in that time period. But it's so important for anyone that you're working with to have a bond of understanding and trust between you. And it was severed instantly. So yeah, that was an issue that I had with a lot of therapists for sure. But I don't think anyone told me in terms of me not doing certain exercises, that was kind of more trial and error from myself.
It's a shame as well, because I mean, you could probably attribute your longevity or the prolonged time that it's taken you because of these because of these kind of experiences or these meetings that you've had with professionals, and essentially you've come away from them feeling more despondent, more kind of frustrated. I mean, thinking, hang on a second, if I'm paying to see this person's a professional, this is making it worse, this is making it go on longer. And it can be really hit and miss. And I've done that myself. I've delivered, and I can kind of I know, yes, I can understand why the physio probably said that, but like you said, it wasn't delivered in the right context.
Yeah.
So to say something like that as a standalone quote and to not explain as to why, you know, if he'd have said, well, you only need to do this for this particular period whilst you're going through the recovery process, then there is a time when you're in 6 months' time, if you're fitter and you're stronger, you can then periodize up to whatever weight you can lift.
Yeah.
You know, if they'd have put a little bit more, I think, background into it, you would have been a bit like, oh, okay, maybe. But I suppose that's the problem. I mean, and it's always, and I always recommend this, and I always say to patients, well, if you don't like what I'm saying, or if whatever I'm saying, probably not really word it like that, but if I say, look, if you're not happy with the treatment or the plan, then maybe you should seek another opinion and get somebody else's opinion. There are so many ways to skin a cat. Everybody will have a different opinion. Yes, based on my knowledge and understanding, albeit not as much as most people in jiu-jitsu, I do know what movement is required. I do know how to progress and to understand certain aspects of, you know, rehabilitation when it comes to getting back on the mat, as opposed to somebody that doesn't. But ideally, we should all have a grounding and a good fundamental understanding of body mechanics and the healing process, etc., and how that kind of affects you in your recovery process. So it's a shame that from the onset, your kind of initial experience wasn't great, because there's a lot of evidence, and the paper and all the literature will support that if you can get on with your professional, your clinician, etc., or you can have a good communicative relationship, your recovery is going to be a lot better.
Yeah, and it is, but you know what, and you know, maybe it's just my natural tendency to try and reframe negatives as a positive, but you know, I'm not, I hold no grudge against anyone that I've saw. I hold no grudge against any treatment that I've had. And you know, if anything, it's framed very, you know, not even having to fight too hard, but I see it as almost a blessing in disguise, because I was able to understand my own body very well. And I took all of my entire experience of dealing with my back issue, taught me so much about body mechanics, about how the body works, about stuff that may be counterintuitive. And I was able to find, I was lucky enough, if you want to call it that, to be able to find my own way of how to treat it, basically. And
which today
I wouldn't have found if I had given,
yeah,
maybe I'd be in a different place.
If you'd handed over responsibility to these people, it probably wouldn't happen. So today, how you manage and control that is by lifting massive rocks.
Basically, yes. That is basically it.
Now, if you look at the biomechanics, let's say we put you in a lab and we put kind of, specific points on of your body, and then looked at you through a 3D image where you pick up those stones, and then you look at what we teach in manual handling. It goes against all sort of concepts, isn't it? Now, the whole, there's a good argument ongoing in the kind of clinical aspect, or in the clinical realm, between physios who are saying, well, what we teach in manual handling isn't necessarily relevant, and it hasn't changed for a long period, and your back doesn't need to be straight, because you can never alleviate flexion when you bend down and pick something up in the spine. Discs are very good at adapting. Even protruding or prolapsed discs are very good at adapting to certain pressures and loading, etc. So, as from a perspective as well, as long as it's non-symptomatic, why would you want to remove that movement? Essentially, why would you strive to keep your back as straight as possible, to bend over and pick up a pencil or a phone? The risk changes, doesn't it? Because the lever or the weight changes. Therefore, why maintain that position? Is it bad for your spine to bend? Not at all. Is it bad for your spine to bend if you have an L5 or an S1 right-sided disc protrusion? Well, yeah, it's probably going to give you some pain, and it's going to impinge on your nerves. So yes, it's going to impact upon that movement, and it is going to give you some symptoms. So initially, when you think, well, I need to avoid the aggravating factors, but that's not, the disc will eventually heal. If you do your right exercises, you will strengthen your core muscles. Do I want to avoid that movement for the future? Well, no, it should be actively promoted.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And that's kind of where I'm at today with my philosophy on sort of, obviously, I'm sure that you're probably aware, but one individual and his subsequent philosophy that's super popular at the moment is Alan Patrick and his knees over toes. And the knees over toes he is the knees over toes guy. And of course, this is the entire philosophy. And it isn't just about training with your knees over your toes. It's the idea that what may traditionally have been taught as a weak position or a dangerous position, it may well be a dangerous position, but a dangerous position does not necessarily need to be avoided. And in fact, if you avoid a dangerous position, well, then when you get put in that dangerous position by factors out of your control, you're not actually able, you have no strength, and you're not used to being there, so you can get injured. So, his whole philosophy of training that position to make your weak position strong, instead of not going into your weak position and leaving it weaker than everything else and having a big imbalance. So my back version of that is basically the rounded back. Maybe if it wasn't for jiu-jitsu, I'd be the round back lifting guy. That thinks that, especially in grappling, we can't, reality is, even if you get taught by some, especially not very educated personal trainers, that when you squat, your knee should never come over your toes or something like that, some really antiquated idea. When you do something like jiu-jitsu, it is not, reality is not gym work where you're going through a controlled range of motion with no external factors, and it's completely slow and controlled the entire time. And there is no more reality than jiu-jitsu, where not only will you be making all of these crazy movements that sometimes you won't have control of, there will be someone else trying to move you in ways that you are not in control of. So it's complete chaos. Sometimes, if you're very lucky, controlled chaos, but it's chaos nonetheless. And your knees are going to come over your toes a lot, and your back is going to be rounded a lot. You cannot do jiu-jitsu with a straight back. It's impossible. Your back is going to be rounded most of the time. And if you avoid ever rounding your back, then when those times do come, you're going to be in trouble. So yeah, I started lifting when I was started training for the Dinny Stones, or I just kind of saw this thing, I never thought I'd be able to lift the stone off the ground. You know, this was the stuff that you see me do. And before I injured my pec, I mean, I'm working back up to it now, but before I injured my pec, you know, my sandbag lifting was starting to get really strong. And that sandbag lifting is something that 5 years prior, I would have told you I will never, ever in my life be able to do. I had no thought I was never going to try and do it. I was going to avoid it like the plague. Any flexion of the hip, I was going to avoid like the plague. And that it's just funny how it turns around. So I started training for the Dinny Stones, which was it was stone lifting, but it was a unique style where you have handles and you straddle over these 2 stones and you lift these 2 stones up. And because of the range of motion, so I hadn't deadlifted in years, a little bit of trap bar, but even the trap bar was too much hip flexion for me. You know, 100 kilos would be enough. Would anything higher would start to scare me. And it's not a lot of weight for a trap bar, you know.
Yeah.
The girls that I train with lift like 150 kilos. So me lifting 100 kilos was no good. I'd rather not do it. So I started training for these Dinny Stones, and the position that you could get in, it was a small range of motion, and I could squat down with my legs, squatting's fine, and I could keep my back basically completely straight, and I could stand up with these stones, or you know, with these training handles with weights on them, and no pain at all, hardly any flexion in the hip. No pain at all. I was like, this is great. Add more weight. This is great. And was starting to build up strength in a part of my lower back that I hadn't trained in years, because I found a way to basically do it that was completely pain-free. And as I started to do it, I found that my back was getting better and better, and I was having less symptoms and less flare-ups and shorter flare-ups. And then so I started training with sandbags a little bit, you know, pretty light sandbags, but I started picking up these sandbags. And you know, this thing that I at one time would have told you that I would avoid like the plague, will never do, basically fixed my back. Not light sandbag lifting, but working myself up to 130, 140 kilos off the ground, backs rounded. You know, people watch it. Oh my God, he's gonna, you know, his vertebrae, his disc's gonna shoot out of his back. I go, well, look, my back's been fucked for years, and this has helped me more than anything. It's a crazy, completely counterintuitive to what most people would think. But what it comes down to, and I'll just finish my final point on this, I think there's a big difference when it comes to round back lifting, just to clarify my position on it. And I talk about this. I have a sandbag training instructional, and I talk about the safety, and I talk about how it helped my back and stuff like that. There is a difference between trying to lift something with a straight back and the weakness of your position forcing you into a rounded back position, right? So you try and lift straight. So you're trying to do a deadlift with a straight spine and your back rounds in doing that. That's how you hurt yourself. However, if you are lifting something that requires you to have a rounded back, and that rounded position is on purpose and controlled, then that's completely fine. And that's what you get when you're lifting stones. And that's what you get when you're lifting sandbags, which is your back has the round, because you cannot lift it with a straight back. And the only instance that I've ever heard someone messaging me, they go, I've been lifting my sandbag, I've hurt my back. I go, oh my God, I've been telling everyone that's the safest way to lift and it's great for your back. And I message him, tell me what happened. He goes, I'm trying to lift it like I'm doing a deadlift. So the irony of trying to keep his back straight by whilst doing a sandbag lift hurt his back in the way that people would think lifting it with a round back would hurt it. But of course, lifting it with a round back is the way you have to, and it wouldn't have hurt. It's just so fascinating. So yeah, that's where
yeah. There's a couple of points I think coming from there, and it's especially your description. It's language, and it's the kind of associated perception that you can cling on to. Like you said, my back is fucked. Now, psychologists would really dive into that and go, what does that mean to you, Dan? What does fuck mean? What would you associate that with?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that as well can can cause more anxiety later on and stop other people with back injuries from doing something. You said something else, but anyway, it's gone. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of language and stuff that we can associate with in regards to our fitness and our level, our state of health. Again, as well, lifting with a straight back. I mean, the back's never particularly straight. The spine
Yeah.
itself, the spinal column in the upright erect position is never straight. It's a discrete S. And as soon as you kind of change, if you start to move into the squatting position, there is, because of the position of the pelvis and where the kind of the sacrum and the coccyx start to move, you will get some sort of flexion. Now, it's a small degree, but it's never essentially straight. So I always say to people, don't focus on keeping your back as straight as possible, especially somebody that's never lifted, because it will never work. Just get comfortable, get in a comfortable position. And as long as you're comfortable and you're pain free, then carry out that movement. But that would be applicable to deadlift, not sandbag lifting.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Now, I've noticed also, let's talk about these grip strengthening kind of this apparatus or this collection of kit that you've got. Fantastic. Where did all of this come from? I mean, literally, I've got, I was looking at your list and I was thinking, there's got to be something on there that he's missed out. Because I remember going into the gym one day, we were working loads of spider guard. Everybody's fingers were all swollen like chipolatas. And it was just like the next day, everybody was like, oh, I can't grip. And I walked in with a tub of Ferroputty.
Yeah.
And I was like, has anybody got some of this? And they were like, what is that? I just, so I was thinking there's got to be something he hasn't got, but looking at
there's plenty, but I try to do my best at most things. And the grip training stuff is it's something that I got interested in many years ago. It's hard not to be into strength training and do jiu-jitsu and not have an interest in grip training. But I think I had a really weak grip. I was 50 kilos when I started training jiu-jitsu, and everyone was bigger and stronger and I could barely hold on to a gi. So the idea of making my grip really strong was really interesting to me. A lot of my early education and information of strength training came from the old school strongmen, and for them grip was a really massive facet of what they were doing. They didn't have these lovely knurled bars or lifting straps. You had to have a strong grip, whether it was bending horseshoes or crushing apples and stuff like that. So I had an interest in grip training and started training my grip. Everyone starts with some little plastic hand grippers and then into nice metal hand grippers. I remember I had a captain's of crush #1 and I could close it. And I remember going to college and I would give it to all of the other kids. No one could close mine. My big, rugby playing, one of my tutors who's a big rugby player, and he couldn't close that captain's of crush #1, and I could rep it out, because you're training on it and you get strong in it. So, that's how it started. And then I started to collect a few more different bits and pieces. And then I thought, they were lying around on the floor. I'm going to put them on this little like maybe 1 foot by 2 foot plank of wood, and I'm going to drill some holes in. I'm going to hang my 3 grippers and my handle and this, and that's basically where it started, the wall of grip. And then it just kind of grew and I've got to the point now. I used to buy stuff from my garage gym every single week. I'd have a new thing every single week for years, if I could find stuff. And I haven't bought anything for it in months and months and months. I have no space. I literally have no space. Wow. I've completely run out. So I've been meaning to do like an in-depth tour of my garage gym for about 10 years. But I always say, no, wait, I'm going to get more stuff. It's going to be better in a month. It's going to be better. And now in the next couple of days, hopefully I'm going to record this because there's almost nothing else that I can fit in there at all. It's just completely covered without covering the middle space and leaving me no space to actually train. So yeah, I have a lot of weird and wonderful kit, for training everything, but especially for training the grip, mainly because the beauty of grip training is that the implements are small because you're holding them, and the hang off stuff, or you connect them to weights, or you do pull-ups off of them and stuff like that, or you do other weird things with your hands. So they tend to be small, so you can get a lot of them in a small space. Whereas sandbags, not the same. Sandbags are huge. Yeah. Stones are huge. You can't get as many of those. So the grip training stuff, there's just a lot more that you can fit in a small amount of space. But also because obviously, as you know, the articulation in that, when I talk about grip, I'm talking, basically shoulder to fingertips is grip for me. It's everything there. Forearms, elbows, biceps, wrists, fingers, all of this stuff constitutes grip. And obviously as humans, with the dexterity that we have, the ranges of motion, the articulation that we have in our hands and fingers, be it, supination, pronation, deviation, flexion, extension, and then all the stuff that we can do with our fingers and our thumb and grip and crush and support. There's so many things that you can do that you need different implements to be able to train all of them. So the stuff that you're going to be doing for training what I would call a hooking position
Hook grip,
here
yeah.
is going to be different for training a cupping position, which is different, going to be, a finger supporting position, which is different from a closed hand, an open hand, and a crush and a pinch, and all of these different things, vertical gripping and conical and circular, so many different ways that you can grip. So I've got shitloads of stuff to go with it.
It's brilliant, mate. It's brilliant. I look forward to that video. So, if we just, I'm conscious of the time. It's gone really quick. I'm a bit gutted, to be honest with you, because there's so much more I wanted to cover, and I didn't realize how fast this was going to go.
I talk too much. That's the problem.
No. Well, listen, people are going to want to listen to you, not me. Where's the kind of the podcast is brilliant, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm a big fan, and there's quite a few people out there that like. I love listening to Rogan. I love listening to your podcast. Lex Freeman, who's exploded onto the scene, has been fantastic. And the best thing about podcasts is you cherry pick which episode you want. You know what I mean? That is, and there's been some ones. I mean, that Ben Poppleton one I messaged you about.
Yeah.
What a character, laughing. I was just laughing out loud listening to that.
Yeah.
And again, we've had some very similar. Well, we've had the same guests on, which I really loved it when you had Jeff Lawson on as well. That was great. I think Jeff's a cracking bloke. Where are you kind of going with it? What's the plan for the podcast? Everybody asks me this, and I just go, well, I just kind of go with the flow. So.
Well, that's it. You don't always need a plan for things, and some stuff you really do need a plan for. The podcast I started because I wanted to just chat to some cool people, and I wanted to, and you plant a seed and you watch it grow, basically, and that's what I was doing with that. I had a studio from maybe 2018 for about 2 years, 2018, 2019. I had. And that was great because I had all my podcast stuff set up, and I could bring someone, come meet me here, and they meet me there, and I could record and do it all. And then I left my teaching position in North London to go travel end of 2019. Bad time to leave your job to go travel, by the way. So I left the studio as well because I wasn't going to be in the UK much. And then obviously I went away for a couple of months, and then COVID hit, and I couldn't go away for 2 more years. So I in that time, for me, it's hard for me to record the podcast because I do all of my episodes in person. So it's difficult. You need to arrange a time that is both convenient for me, which can be difficult, and a time that's convenient for the person that I'm going to meet. And it's sort of like a whole day thing for me to I have to travel. Because I don't have the studio at the moment. I will look to reset up a studio when I settle in, hopefully this year. But it's difficult. So at the moment, it's a very mobile setup. It means that when I go traveling, if I go on a seminar tour, so when I went down south, I could record a few episodes as I travel around, kind of fit the time in. I'm going to be hopefully doing another seminar tour up north and have a lot more people to get, because I'm not running out of people, but I've recorded with a lot of people in London, and there's a lot of people that I really want to chat to around the country. So it's basically it for now, is try and record as much as I can, and continue just making episodes. That's basically the goal for me. There's no it's nothing more than that. Continue to record episodes, continue to chat to cool people, and continue to get their voices out there. Basically, that's my goal for the podcast. Simple.
Yeah, brilliant. There's nothing wrong with a simple goal. I don't think there has to be a kind of complex end game. Well, I'm doing this because of X, Y, and Z. I mean, I get so much from it. I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting to you today. It's been fantastic. Obviously, we didn't have that much time, and you were busy at Warwick. But the stuff I want to ask you, and I just think, well, if I could record it and get it out there, then anybody else that wants to listen to it, you're more than welcome. So
that's exactly it. That's what podcasting is all about, and it's a beautiful platform. I'm a real fan of long form conversation, and I kind of hate. I mean, I like it as well, but I kind of hate Instagram a little bit, because especially, and you kind of have to conform to whatever Instagram decides they want to make popular. And at the moment, it's like really, really short, quick stuff. And I like, because I talk a lot, and 15 seconds or a minute is very not is usually not long enough for me to get into anything I like to talk about. So I like to have the podcast where it's very, very laid back. It's going to be consumed in a very different way. It's not consumed in the way that most social media is consumed. It's consumed in a much more relaxed way, and it feels a lot more human to listen to someone talk for an hour or 2 hours. Then my longest episode is like 3 hours and 30 or 40 minutes or something crazy. I mean, I think that was the Dan Hardy one, 3 hours 45, and that could have gone on for about 6 hours, no problem. But you know, I feel like it's a much more, even though we're still doing it, you know, they're still going to be listening on their phone, or they're still going to be watching on YouTube. It feels like my goal with the podcast is basically I'm going to have a conversation with a really cool guest, and you can come sit in the room with me and listen, basically. And so I really do like the medium of podcasting.
It's great. Yeah. I think it offers you that opportunity for no kind of false pretenses, no barriers, just two people having a good conversation. There might be stuff that you agree with, there might be stuff that you disagree with, but we're kind of, you know, we've lost that, or we've not really been able to access because of how things are. Like you said, social media is such a short attention span. We've lost that ability to sit and listen to a good conversation and go, you know, well, yeah, that's a good point, or no, that's not a good point. You're not trying to debate with people, but through conversation, you can get a debate going, or you can have two sides of an opinion, or you can agree, which I think is really good, and it's great. Well, I'm really good. I'm gutted. I'm gonna have to go.
I mean, dude, if you got any more questions, hit me up. Let's go. We got a bit of time if you have.
Should we? Well, I'm conscious I've got patience in a few minutes. So
oh really? Okay.
Yeah. So this is unfortunately why I've got to go, because
I'll come back on another time.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Would that be all right? Yeah. Would you come back on again?
Yeah, that's totally cool.
Brilliant. Nice one. Okay. Well, we'll wrap it up there today. I'll get you scheduled in for part 2 soon.
Okay.
Thanks very much for coming on. I'm going to stop.
My absolute pleasure.
Dan Strauss, the Raspberry Ape.